Hello, music lovers. Welcome back. I was inspired by a few things recently. First of all, one of the tracks submitted on the track roast a couple of months back by Dom was a piano house track, which had some, shall we say, interesting chord choices. And it's just one of those things that beginners do a lot. Until you develop an ear for harmony, if you stick to the scale, you don't always realize that not every chord in the scale sounds great. I have mentioned a few rules of thumb across various videos, but even though I cover a lot of bass principles which can be applied to multiple genres, not putting genres in the video titles doesn't give some people a reason to click on them. Anyway, fast forward to last week, I was listening to a techno set, and in there was this kind of piano tech house track. It's Len Farkey's remix of Black Patterns by DJ Bone. Thank you, Shazam. And the bit that caught my ear was this piano stab, which kind of moves around in linear blocks. It made me think I could make a plugin which does this for me. And while I'm at it, I can make it do all the things I would normally advise other people to do. So I present to you the Bthelick Chorder. Let me just show you the track I was working on so you get the vibe and hear it in action first. Techno-y, tech housey, piano roller thing. That's the kind of vibe. Anyway, let me show you what's going on. So the MIDI is all just pressing one note at a time. And the whole premise is you don't know anything about your chords and you don't know anything about your scales. The only thing you need to know is how to count to 7, because the way we program our chord progression in this is simply to use all the white notes starting from A. Doesn't matter what key you want the track to be in, or what chords you want to make, or even what scale you want the chords to be in. As long as you use A to represent chord 1, it will do the rest for you. So, in other words, just to quickly demonstrate, A is chord 1, that makes B chord 2, C would be chord 3, D is chord 4, and so on and so on. So, we can pick a rhythm and then choose any of the 7 notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, to make our progression. You can see here in my track, I chose 1, 6, 3, and 7. That's A, F, C, and G, but we're not actually in A. That brings me neatly to the first parameter, key. As you can see, if you hover over any of these parameters, the text box on the left will tell you what they do. If you don't see this box on your Ableton, it's this little arrow in the corner here. I think it's called the info view, something like that. Yes. Anyway, so our first dial here is what key you want to be in. In fact, let me program a quick MIDI. Obviously, why not pick chord 1 to start with, A. Actually, let me just use one note for now so I can show you the chord options. Typical house rhythm. Let's put that over the kick. There we go. Lovely. Okay, let me reset this to how it's going to arrive to you guys. Turn the octave off. All the options off. So now we're in A. This is actually an A you're hearing. A minor. Although it doesn't have to be. As you can see on the right here, we have some scale options. The second dial selects a scale. But before I show you that, just back to key for a second. As you can see on the left, it says the first one, 0, is A. 1 up is A sharp. 2 is B. 3 is C, and so on. So that's where you select your key. Then we pick our scale. As you can see on the left there, 0 to 24 would select minor. And then next up is Phrygian. You won't hear the chord change though. Phrygian shares the same chord 1 as minor. as does Dorian, in fact. You will hear it swap when we go to major. So there's major. There's also Mixolydian, but it shares the same chord 1 as major, so we won't hear it change just yet. Scale will make a bigger difference later on when we start changing chords. Your next style is octave. Very simple. To the right is 1 octave up, to the left is 1 octave down. In the middle is default. Comes in handy if you've decided to change key and now everything sounds too high or too low. And also if you've been playing with the next parameter, voicing, and things sound too high or low, you can adjust with the octave. I'll change everything back to the defaults for now. Onto the bottom row, we have voicing. Voicing changes the order of the notes. So it's the same chord, but the notes are in a different order. The first option puts the middle note at the top. I call this the classic EDM spread. Sounds very melodic when you're changing chords around. Next, something we call an inverted triad. Basically, it's got less lower notes, so it sounds less muddy in certain situations. And the last one is a really wide spread of notes. So those are your voicing options, basically different flavors of the same chord. And next up is something called alterations, chord alterations. These take the middle note of the chord and move it around. So unlike a voicing, this actually changes a note. The first option deletes the third, deletes the middle note. So you're left with the bottom note and the top note. This is what we call a power chord, or fifth chord. Something Medusa uses a lot, I've noticed. The next option takes the middle note and moves it down. So instead of on 3, it's on 2. We call this a suspended second. You might be able to hear where that would come in useful. And the next one is a suspended fourth, the opposite, it moves it up. So if you play around between the original chord, the suspended second and the suspended fourth, you can get those classic dance moves in the melodies. Have a play about automating those in there. Okay, the next style is extensions. Adding notes upwards, basically. Your first option is a seventh. And we have what's called an add 9. Lastly, both 7th and 9th. That covers all your typical extensions. And lastly, we have the option of an extra bass octave. So let's program a little progression. Let me extend our MIDI part here. Let's pick some randoms. 1, 4, 3, 7. Okay. So what it's doing is not only making the chords for you, it's keeping them in scale. But not only that, it won't let you use weird chords like chord 2 in minor. Let me show you what happens there. See how chord 2 sounds fine? What it's doing is replacing chord 2 with chord 7, but what we call an inversion. Because chord 7 has note 2 in it, you can put note 2 in the bass of chord 7. So that sounds good now. And it also does other things, like if you've ever heard me in a chord tutorial talk about not seventhing a seventh, not putting a 7th extension on chord 7 in a minor key, you'll hear there's no 7th on this chord 7. In other words, it's saving you from some of the stranger chords that, even though they're technically in the scale, sound weird and you don't know why. It takes care of that for you. Let's try another scale. Here's what our progression sounds like in major. things like Frisian that have that strange note 2, the flattened 2. Let's put a 2 here. So even though we're pressing technically a normal 2, it's doing everything for us. It's giving us that flat 2, the thing that makes Frisian special. So it lets you have a play around, basically. In other words, it's like you pressing and guessing, but then me correcting the chords for you. That should save you some time being confused, trying to work out chords, and lets you react more emotionally to what you're listening to. Now, between the alterations, the voicings, and the extensions, it can get a little crunchy, or should we call it jazzy?
Too jazzy?
Yeah, too jazzy.
It's not completely unbreakable, but you might find some gems in there, you never know. Let me give you a quick example of programming some of those alterations so you can get some nice internal chord melodies going on. Something like that. So there we have it, the Bthelick Chorder. It's yours to use and abuse. And before I go, there's a technical note. We learned last time I gave racks away that some of the racks are only going to work in Ableton 11.1 onwards. Unfortunately, I can't test this in anything before that. So let me know if it does work in Ableton 10, and my apologies if not. Anyways, I hope some of you find that useful. Let me know how you get on. And in the meantime, help the channel, if you will, by pressing some buttons. Or you can help me out by buying me a coffee from the link in the description. And until next time, I'll see you in the comments. Bye-bye.